You ever watch the rain slide down your window at night? And notice a light flicker somewhere out in the darkness where there shouldn't be one? That's how it started for me. A single, soft glow in the middle of an empty field. One that seemed to move every time I blinked. It was late October, somewhere between midnight and the hour where the world goes completely still. I was house-sitting for a friend who lived on the outskirts of town, a small farmhouse surrounded by acres of nothing but trees and fog. The kind of place where the night feels thicker than air, and even the crickets stop chirping when the wind picks up. The rain had been steady all day, but by nightfall, it had turned into a full-blown storm. I sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, half listening to the rhythmic hum of water hitting the glass. It was calming until the power went out. The hum of the refrigerator died. The lights flickered once, then disappeared entirely. The house exhaled into total darkness. At first, I didn't panic. Storms like this were common out there, and power lines went down often. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and started fumbling through drawers looking for candles. That's when I saw it. The light outside. It wasn't lightning, and it wasn't the reflection of my phone. It was steady, golden, like the glow of an old oil lantern swaying gently in the rain. It came from beyond the tree line. About 50 yards out, I stood frozen at the window, watching it drift slowly left, then right, then stop. My brain immediately tried to rationalize it. Maybe a neighbor? A hiker caught in the storm? But the nearest house was over 2 miles away, and the field between us was fenced off and thick with mud. No one should have been there. Not in that storm. Then I saw movement, a shape. Someone or something was walking with the light. The figure was small, maybe 5 feet tall, wrapped in something long and heavy that shimmered wet under the rain. They stopped halfway across the field and tilted the lantern upward toward the house, toward me. The moment that glow touched the window, my phone flickered and died, complete black. I stumbled backward, knocking into a chair, the sound echoing through the silent house. For a few seconds, there was only rain, until another sound joined it. A faint, deliberate tap, tap, tap from the glass. My chest tightened. I forced myself to look, heart hammering. Nothing, just rain sliding down the pane. But beneath it, I swore I heard something else. Something soft, like breathing. I told myself I was tired, that my imagination was running wild. But before I could even take a step back, I heard it again. This time, from inside the house. Not from outside, from the hallway. A slow, dragging creak, followed by the unmistakable shuffle of footsteps on the old wooden floor. I froze. My friend had told me the house sometimes made noises when the temperature dropped, but this was different. The steps were measured, careful, like someone trying not to be heard. I raised my dead phone instinctively, as if holding it would somehow protect me. "Hello?" I whispered. No answer. I backed into the living room, my socks slipping slightly on the wooden floor. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, the only sound was my pulse pounding in my ears. Then, from upstairs, through the dark and the storm, came a whisper. "Can you see it too?" Every muscle in my body seized. The voice was faint, almost carried by the wind, but it was clear, too human to be imagined. I should have run. I should have bolted out the front door and into the storm. But something about that voice, small, almost pleading, rooted me in place. "Who's there?" I called out. My voice cracked halfway through. No answer. Just the low moan of the storm outside and a dragging sound. Something heavy being pulled across the floor above me. My shaking hands finally found a candle and a lighter. I struck the wick. The small flame flickered weakly, throwing shaky golden light across the walls. When I turned back toward the window, the lantern light outside was still there, but closer now, just beyond the fence. And that's when I realized something that made my stomach drop. The lantern wasn't being held by someone. It was hanging from a tree branch, swaying gently in the rain. But the silhouette I had seen before was still standing beneath it, motionless. I turned away, reaching for my jacket, trying to think, to breathe. When I looked back, the figure was gone. The lantern still swayed, but the space beneath it was empty. Then I heard it again, the whisper. This time, right behind my ear. "Don't let it in." I spun around, nearly dropping the candle. No one, not a single drop hit the glass. The silence that followed was worse than any sound. And then, creak. The front door, slowly opening. I stood frozen as the door moved on its own. Just a few inches at first, then wider, as if pushed by a wet hand. Outside, the lantern's light began swaying harder, almost violently, like it was caught in a wind that didn't exist. And in that glow, something stepped forward. It was pale, thin, human, but wrong. Its face seemed to shift, the features sliding like wax melting in heat. The eyes were hollow and dark, and its mouth opened without sound. Only a faint hiss, like air escaping through cracks in a wall. The candlelight flickered, shrinking to a trembling pin of flame. My knees nearly gave out. Then I remembered the voice's warning. "Don't let it in." I lunged forward, slamming the door shut and locking it twice. My palms pressed hard against the cold wood. Outside, there was silence. Then, tap, tap, from the other side. Each tap slower than the last, more deliberate. And then, through the wood, so close it felt like it was whispering against my skin. I heard it again. "Can you see the light?" I stayed like that until dawn. Back against the wall, the candle burning down to a stub, the tapping never fully stopping. When the first light of morning crept through the curtains, I finally dared to look outside. The field was empty. No footprints, no lantern, just wet grass glistening under a weak sunrise. But when I turned toward the window, something made my breath catch. There, on the glass, faint but visible, was a handprint. Not mine. Smaller, narrower, and when I touched it, it was ice cold. 2 days later, I called my friend to tell her what happened. She was quiet for a long time before she finally said, "The man who built that house disappeared during a storm like that. They found his lantern hanging from a tree in the field, but his body was never found." I haven't gone back since, but sometimes, on nights when the rain hits my apartment window just right, I see it again. That same faint glow, far beyond the glass, swaying, waiting, and I never, ever look too long. Have you ever stayed somewhere that refused to let you go? Where every door you open leads right back to where you started, no matter how far you run? I used to think that kind of thing only existed in nightmares, until the day the house decided to keep us. It started 3 summers ago, when my best friend, Mark, found the listing online. Old farmhouse for rent. Cheap, quiet, 2 hours outside the city. It sounded perfect. We were both exhausted, burned out from work, broke and desperate to escape our suffocating apartment. The photos looked peaceful enough. A big yard, trees, sunlight spilling through lace curtains, and vintage furniture. But at the bottom of the ad, one strange line stood out. Tenants must not stay past the 3rd night. Mark laughed, calling it superstition, but something about it made my stomach twist. I even called the number on the listing, and an elderly woman answered in a shaky voice. "You can rent it," she said, "but when it starts raining, leave." Then she hung up. We should have listened. The drive there was calm, surrounded by forests and open sky. When we arrived, the house stood tall at the end of a gravel road. 3 stories, pale gray, ivy crawling up its sides like veins. It was beautiful in that unsettling way, where everything feels too still. Inside, it smelled faintly of cedar and dust. A floral wallpaper was peeling. The furniture old but inviting. The lace curtains untouched by time. It was cozy in a deceptive sort of way, the kind that makes you forget your unease. We unpacked, cooked dinner, played cards by candlelight. No phone signal, no neighbors, just the sound of crickets. That first night, we slept like we hadn't in months. The next morning, rain woke me up. It wasn't supposed to rain. The forecast had said clear skies. But outside, a storm was already brewing. The air was thick and damp, carrying the smell of wet earth. When I went downstairs, Mark stood by the front door, frowning. "I could have sworn this opened the other way yesterday," he said. I laughed, thinking he was joking. But when he opened it, I froze. Beyond the door wasn't the yard or our car. It was the hallway. The same hallway we were standing in. We tried again. Same thing. The back door too. Even the kitchen window showed only a reflection of the living room, not the outside. By noon, every exit had vanished. The bathroom led to the kitchen. The kitchen led upstairs. The upstairs hallway led back to the living room. The house was folding in on itself. Mark tried to rationalize it. Hidden passages, mirror tricks, quantum something. But fear had already set in. That night, the storm grew worse. Wind screamed through the chimney. The lights flickered. And that's when we heard them. Voices. Not from outside, but from inside the walls. At first, it was just a murmur, like running water. But then the words formed. Don't leave yet. Stay. You're almost ready. When we pressed our ears to the walls, the whispers stopped. But the plaster was warm, almost pulsing. Mark's voice trembled. This place isn't empty. We barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard them whispering again, coaxing, soothing, like they wanted us to surrender. Then, around 3 a.m., something knocked on my door. 3 slow, deliberate taps. I opened it. No one was there. But the carpet outside was soaked, as if someone dripping wet had stood there for hours. By the 3rd day, Mark was gone. I tore through the house, shouting his name. Every hallway looked slightly different. The furniture moved, wallpaper shifted, like the house was alive and rearranging itself. I finally found him in the attic, staring out the window. His eyes were vacant, his clothes damp, though he hadn't been outside. I found the way out, he whispered, and pointed behind me. I turned to see a door that hadn't been there before. Black wood, wet to the touch, mold crawling around its frame. My instincts screamed to run, but when I turned back, Mark was gone again. I opened the door. It led to the same room, only darker, heavier. The rain sounded slower, thicker, almost liquid. And then I saw him again, standing by the same window. His reflection was smiling. He wasn't. They won't let us, he said. Then handprints appeared on the walls, wet, gray, dragging downward as if something inside the walls was trying to crawl out. A voice whispered right beside my ear, soft and breathy. You were supposed to stay. I ran. Every hallway twisted back on itself. Every door led to nowhere. But then, I saw it. The front door, wide open, rain pouring through. I ran, my feet pounding the floor, the air thick with the smell of rot and wet wood. I burst outside, falling into the mud, gasping for breath. When I looked back, the house stood silent, still. But Mark was in the doorway, staring at me with empty eyes. Slowly, he raised his hand and pointed upward. I followed his gaze. On the roof, something crouched, a figure, pale and long-limbed, its face stretched and wrong. It tilted its head and smiled. I turned and ran until my lungs burned. By dawn, a truck driver found me wandering along the road and called the police. They searched the area, but there was no house, just an empty field. No sign of mark, no structure. Only a wide circular patch of earth where the grass wouldn't grow. Still damp, though it hadn't rained in days. Sometimes I dream I'm still inside that house, running through endless hallways, opening doors that only lead back to themselves, and through the sound of falling rain. I still hear that same voice, whispering softly, almost kindly, "You were supposed to stay." Have you ever been alone during a storm, when the thunder feels too close, and the shadows outside your window move like they're looking for a way in? That night, I learned something I'll never forget. If someone knocks during a storm, don't open the door. It was the middle of March, the kind of night where the sky looked bruised and swollen, and the air carried that metallic taste that meant lightning was near. I was alone in my family's old cabin, deep in the woods of northern Washington. My parents had moved years ago, but I still used the cabin as a weekend retreat. Quiet, disconnected, safe. At least, it used to feel that way. The rain began around 9 and turned into a full downpour by 10. The roof hissed beneath the weight of the water, and every gust of wind made the old pine trees groan like they were alive. Then the power went out, plunging everything into the kind of darkness that makes you feel like you're sinking underwater. I lit a few candles, grabbed a blanket, and sat on the couch, waiting for the storm to pass. My phone had no signal. Not unusual for that area. For a while, it was almost peaceful. The sound of the storm and the flicker of candlelight blending into something comforting. But that calm shattered when I heard the first knock. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. The sound came from the front door. Thick wood with a single frosted glass pane that faced the porch. No one should have been out there. The nearest neighbor was 2 miles away, and the road was a swamp of mud. I waited, straining my ears through the roar of rain and wind. Then, another knock, harder this time. My throat tightened as I called out, "Who's there?" Silence. I grabbed my flashlight, creeping toward the window overlooking the porch. When I angled the light toward the door, at first I saw nothing, and then a shape. Tall, thin, completely still. A drenched figure stood beyond the glass, its outline faint but unmistakable. The beam caught what looked like an old coat, soaked and torn, clinging to a body that didn't move, didn't even sway with the wind. Something primal told me not to go closer, but guilt and curiosity tugged at me. I opened the door just a crack, Cold air and rain rushed in, stinging my skin. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked. The figure didn't answer. It only turned its head toward me, slowly, and that's when I realized it wasn't wearing a coat. The texture I'd seen wasn't fabric. It was skin, stretched thin, cracked, and soaked with rain. I slammed the door so hard, the walls rattled. For 20 minutes, I sat in the dark, heart pounding, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. Then came the second knock, from the back door this time. Faster, impatient. Knock, 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 knock. The air smelled damp and moldy, like something long dead had been disturbed. I crept toward the kitchen window and peered out into the storm. Two figures now stood in the backyard, side by side in the rain, motionless. When lightning flashed, I saw them raise their heads. Their faces were pale, translucent, their mouths hanging open without sound, their eyes two black pits reflecting the light. I stumbled back as the knocking spread. Front door, back door, even the walls. It was everywhere at once. The windows trembled, and I heard faint whispers through the wind. "Let us in. Please, we're cold." But the voices didn't sound desperate. They sounded amused, like they were playing a game. I shouted, "Leave me alone!" And suddenly, silence. When I opened my eyes again, it was midnight. The storm had gone eerily quiet, the rain soft and rhythmic now. I almost thought it was over, until I saw the muddy footprints. They started at the back door and ended right in front of me. Something was inside. My breath hitched. I grabbed the poker from the fireplace and turned slowly. The candlelight flickered across the room, shadows bending unnaturally. The air was freezing and smelled like stagnant pond water. Then, right behind me, a whisper brushed my ear. "You opened the door." I spun around, swinging the poker wildly, but there was no one there, just my reflection in the window. Except, my reflection wasn't moving. It stayed still for 1 second too long, and then, slowly, it smiled. I don't remember much after that. The windows burst open, rain and wind crashing in all at once. Shapes moved in the corners. Faces pressed against the glass. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, until they became a chorus of screams. "Stay!" Then everything went black. When I woke, I was lying on the porch, drenched and freezing. The storm had passed, and the morning sky was pale and still. The cabin door was wide open. Inside, everything was dry. No footprints, no mud, not even a trace of the candles I'd lit. But carved, I sold the cabin that same week. The new owners called me 2 nights later, terrified. They said it rained both nights, and that someone had knocked at their door around midnight. They didn't open it. But when they looked through the window, they swore they saw me standing there, on the porch, smiling. There's a house on the edge of my hometown that no one lives in anymore. The strange thing is, it rains there all the time, even when the skies are clear everywhere else. And the last person who tried to spend the night inside never came back out the same. I used to drive past that house every day on my way to work. It sat about a mile off the main road, half hidden by overgrown willows and a rusting iron gate that leaned like it wanted to fall. The place had been empty for years. A 2-story farmhouse with gray water-stained walls and a porch that looked ready to collapse. But what made it stand out wasn't the decay, it was the rain. Even during the hottest summer afternoons, when the asphalt shimmered and cicadas screamed, that stretch of land was always wet. You could see it from the road, a thin mist clinging to the grass, drops sliding off the roof, puddles glinting in the dirt driveway. Locals called it the Weeping House. Most people avoided it. I didn't. I'm a freelance photographer who documents abandoned places, old hospitals, forgotten churches, ruins that time has swallowed. So when someone mentioned the Weeping House one night at a bar, I knew I had to see it up close. It was early evening when I parked by the gate. The sun hung low, painting the horizon gold. But beyond the fence, the light seemed to die. Clouds hovered directly over the house, gray and heavy, like they'd been waiting for me. And sure enough, it was raining. Not hard, but steady. The kind of endless drizzle that seeps into your skin. The sound of it on the leaves and tin roof filled the air like static. I stepped through the gate. The gravel crunched, soft and waterlogged beneath my boots. Within seconds, my jacket was soaked, and the air was thick with the scent of wet earth and mold. The front door was cracked open, hinges rusted. Inside, it was dim and cold. Water dripped from the ceiling, gathering in shallow pools that reflected the fading light. The wallpaper peeled like dead skin, and every step echoed through the empty halls. Yet it didn't feel entirely abandoned. A single chair stood upright near the window. A teacup sat on the table, filled to the brim with clear rainwater. And through it all, that sound, dripping, steady, constant, like the house itself was crying. In the back room, I found a leather-bound notebook on the windowsill, perfectly dry despite the dampness around it. The first page was dated 1972. The handwriting was neat and looping. It won't stop raining. We tried sealing the windows, fixing the roof, even prayed. But the water finds its way in, always. The entries grew stranger. The children hear whispers at night. They say the house hums to them, like a lullaby. Another read, "Last night I saw someone standing outside, but there were no footprints in the mud this morning." The final line was smeared with something dark, but I could still make out the words. "The rain belongs to her. She's still here." My pulse quickened. I looked up. and realized every window in the house was fogged from the inside. As I moved deeper in, the sound of water changed. It wasn't just dripping anymore. It sounded like breathing. Soft, rhythmic, close. The air grew heavy, the kind that feels like it's pressing against your lungs. I entered what must have been the master bedroom. The wallpaper was dark blue, peeling in damp strips. The bed was still made, though the mattress had collapsed inward, soaked through. I lifted my camera and took a photo. The flash illuminated the room for a split second, and that's when I saw her in the mirror. A woman, pale, drenched, wearing a long, old-fashioned nightgown. Her hair hung over her face, dripping. When I turned, she was gone. I looked at my camera display. The photo was black. Not dim, not blurred, just black. Then, from behind me, I heard a voice whisper, low and wet. "Stay." I ran for the door, but it was gone. Where it had been was now a solid wall, slick with water, rippling like the surface of a pond. Water began pouring from the ceiling, cascading down the stairs, flooding the hall. The walls groaned. The floorboards bulged beneath my feet. Through the rising water, I saw her again. The woman, standing on the stairs, her eyes cloudy and gray like rain-soaked glass. She raised her arm and pointed, not at me, but behind me. I turned, and the mirror from the bedroom was there, upright in the middle of the hall. Water streamed down its surface, distorting the reflection, but I wasn't alone in it. Dozens of figures stood behind me, faces blurred, bodies moving like they were suspended underwater, their eyes fixed on me. I stumbled backward as the water climbed to my knees. My flashlight slipped from my hand and vanished beneath the surface. Then she was there, right in front of me. She touched my shoulder with a hand that was ice cold and whispered, "You shouldn't have come." When I woke, I was lying in the mud outside. The storm had vanished. The sky was clear, birds singing, sunlight breaking through the clouds. The house looked ordinary, dry, empty, harmless. I scrambled to my car and drove until I couldn't see it anymore. That night, I checked my camera. Every single photo was blank, except one. It showed the living room, empty, still dripping wet. But in the reflection of the window behind me stood a woman in a nightgown, her face pale and still, watching me. That was 6 months ago. I haven't gone back. But sometimes when the weather's right, I drive past from a distance. There's a new for sale sign by the gate now, rust streaking down its post. And every time I pass, it's raining. Only there, over that one patch of land. And once, only once, I saw someone standing in the upstairs window, smiling faintly, her white dress rippling as if caught in a wind that didn't exist. They say you can still hear the phone ringing at the old Ridgeway Motel. even though the building's been condemned for years. The weird thing is, if you pick it up, someone answers, and they already know your name. I was driving cross-country one stormy night, half awake and half lost. The rain had been coming down for hours, the kind that blurs the world into streaks of gray and white, where even the wipers can't keep up. When I saw the flicker of a faded neon sign through the rain, Ridgeway Motel, vacancy, it felt like salvation. I pulled off the highway, rolling slowly up a cracked driveway lined with weeds. The sign buzzed weakly, most of its letters dead, leaving behind a ghostly "Read AIT." The place looked long abandoned, boarded windows, one door hanging crooked, yet the vacancy light still glowed red, and the office door stood open like it had been waiting. The rain was relentless, so I ducked inside. The lobby smelled of mildew and dust. A cracked bell sat on the counter beside a rotary phone and a yellowed guest book. No one was there, just the flickering hum of a dying bulb overhead. Out of habit, I picked up the pen and signed my name, Mark H. As soon as I lifted the pen, the rotary phone rang, loud and sharp in the stillness. I hesitated, then answered. "Ridgeway Motel," I said, trying to sound casual. A woman's voice whispered through the static. "You shouldn't have written it down." Then the line went dead. I should have left. But the rain outside was impenetrable. Behind the counter hung a key rack with only one key left. Room 6. I grabbed it and stepped back into the downpour. The whole row of rooms was dark, except for mine, where a faint orange light bled through the curtains. Inside, the air was thick and damp, the carpet squishing beneath my feet. The wallpaper peeled like dead skin, and the mirror was cracked. The TV was on, showing static, hissing softly. I turned it off, but the sound didn't stop. It was coming from the phone on the nightstand. It wasn't even plugged in. Then it rang. My heart jumped. I picked up. "Hello?" Only silence. Then a faint dripping sound, followed by a man's whisper. "You checked in alone, didn't you?" My voice cracked. "Who is this?" The voice gave a low, broken chuckle. "That's what he said." Click. The line died. The rain outside had stopped suddenly, unnaturally, and in the silence that followed, another phone began to ring, somewhere down the hallway. I followed the sound to room 2. The door was slightly ajar, and the ringing echoed through the empty corridor. Inside, the room was bare, except for a rotary phone sitting neatly on the bed. Its cord trailed into nothing. I touched it, and it stopped ringing. Then a whisper brushed my ear. "Don't answer his call." I spun around, no one there. The door slammed shut behind me, trapping me inside. The static roared from the phone again, louder, and beneath it came a slow, rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming on glass. Then I saw it, the mirror above the dresser, fogged with condensation. covered in handprints from the inside. The phone rang again, shrill and relentless. I backed into a corner, shaking, whispering, "No, no, no." But the ringing didn't sound like a phone anymore. It pulled at me, made my hands move on their own until I was holding the receiver again. The air went still. "Mark," said a voice, or many voices, layered and drowned in static. "We've been waiting for you." My breath hitched. "Where are you?" The reply came in a whisper. "Room 6. Come back. Finish the call." Then, silence. When I opened the door, the hallway was different. Dark. Flooded. Water streamed down the walls, and every step I took splashed deeper. By the time I reached room 6, it was half submerged, and the phone, floating on the water, was ringing. I grabbed it, trembling. "Hello?" The voice that answered wasn't human. "You shouldn't have come back." Then the rain itself began whispering, each drop speaking words, names, fragments I couldn't understand. Something touched my arm. Cold, slimy. I turned, and beneath the water, dozens of pale faces stared up at me, mouths moving in unison, forming one word: stay. When I woke, I was lying on the side of the highway, soaked and shivering. My car sat nearby, engine cold. The motel was gone. Nothing but an empty, overgrown lot. But on the passenger seat was a rotary phone, its cord cut clean, dripping water onto the floor mat. I hurled it out the window and drove until the sun rose. That was 3 years ago. I've moved twice since then, changed my number, sold the car. But sometimes, when the rain starts pounding against my windows, my phone rings. The caller ID says Ridgeway Motel, Room 6. And no matter what time it is, the line always connects on the first ring. I thought I was just taking the last bus home on a stormy night. But when you see a shadow move in the window's reflection, and it isn't yours, you realize some rides are never meant to end. It was a late Tuesday night in September, the kind where the city feels hollow and washed clean by rain, the streets glowing like liquid glass under the streetlights. I'd stayed too long at the library, my phone almost dead, and when the bus finally arrived, its brakes screamed in protest. The driver barely looked at me, his face hidden by the glare of the lights. But I could see the outline of a hat. Inside, the bus was nearly empty. Just me, the driver, and an elderly woman knitting something gray 3 rows back. I sat by the window, watching rain trace patterns down the glass, lulled by the rhythm of the engine and the storm. For a while, it felt peaceful, until the bus curved around a bend and I saw a shape in the reflection. A human-like shadow behind me, its limbs wrong, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. I blinked, and it vanished. I told myself it was the rain, a trick of the light. but unease crept up my spine like cold water. When I looked back, the old woman was gone. Her seat was empty, except for the half-finished scarf she'd been knitting. "Ma'am?" I called softly, but the only answer was the hiss of the wipers. I used my phone's dying flashlight to check the back. The seats were wet, as though someone had just been dripping there, but she was gone. That's when I heard it. A whisper behind me. "Why are you here?" I spun around, heart hammering. No one. The bus rattled on. The reflection in the window showed only the aisle, until it didn't. The shadow was back, closer this time, its face smeared into featureless black. Its arm rose slowly, pressing against the inside of the glass. The bus lights flickered. The world outside vanished into total darkness. Then, as quickly as it came, it was gone. The lights steadied. The road returned. But my seat was wet. The bus made several stops, though I never saw anyone board or leave. Each time the doors opened, a cold gust swept through, carrying the smell of rust and wet soil. At one point, I felt breath beside me, steady, uneven. The seat was empty, but the reflection showed someone sitting there. A man-shaped shadow, head bowed. The fog on the window formed a word. "Stay." I stumbled to the front. "Hey, there's someone back there," I shouted. The driver didn't react. Then I saw the mirror above him, the one meant for watching passengers. His head wasn't there. Just darkness. We reached the edge of town, trees pressing close on either side. I pulled the cord for my stop. The bell dinged. The bus didn't slow down. "Stop the bus!" I yelled, panic rising. Through the windshield reflection, I saw the road ahead dissolve into nothing. A cliff. "Stop!" I screamed, lunging for the brake, but my hand passed through it like air. Shadows filled the windows, faces pressing against the glass, mouths open in silent screams. In the reflection, every seat was now full. Smoke-like passengers staring straight at me. "You shouldn't have looked," they whispered in one voice. The world tilted. The rain went silent, and everything turned black. When I woke, I was lying by the roadside, soaked and shaking. The bus was gone. No tire marks, no lights, no sound. Just the whisper of wind through wet trees. A tow truck driver found me an hour later and said I looked like I'd seen a ghost. The police told me no buses had run that late in years. The last one, Route 47, had gone off the ridge in 1998 during a storm. No survivors. They showed me a photo, the driver wearing the same hat. Only this time, his head was missing. It's been months since that night. But every time the rain comes hard enough to blur the world outside my windows, I hear it. The hum of wheels on wet asphalt, the faint hiss of air brakes. And sometimes, just sometimes, when I glance at my car window, I see it reflected behind me. A bus gliding silently through the dark. Headlights off. Empty. Except for the seat beside my reflection, where someone else is sitting. Some calls come from numbers you don't recognize. Most of the time, it's nothing. A wrong number, spam, a prank. But sometimes, the call isn't from the world of the living. And if you answer, it might not let you hang up. It was a little past midnight when my phone began to ring. Rain pounded the windows in relentless sheets, drowning out every other sound. I was half asleep on the couch, the TV flickering with the remnants of a forgotten documentary, when my screen lit up. Unknown caller. Normally I'd ignore it, but the ringtone sounded warped, echoing like it was being played underwater. My stomach twisted. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen, before finally answering. Hello? Static. Faint, distant, like wind whispering through wires. Who is this? I said again. That's when I heard it. A slow, ragged breath, right against the speaker. Then a whisper. You shouldn't be alone tonight. The voice was soft, almost tender, but it froze me solid. I tried to sound annoyed, asked again who it was, but the static rose, and under it, I heard wet footsteps sloshing through puddles. Then, the call cut out. I sat there in the dark, phone still in my hand, heart hammering. I checked the call log. No number. Just no caller ID. I tried to shrug it off, convincing myself it was some prank. But the air in my apartment felt heavier, colder. I made tea and tried to ignore the storm. Then, through the rain-streaked window, I saw movement. Someone was standing at the far edge of the parking lot, tall, unmoving, head bowed under the downpour. Lightning flashed, and I saw it clearly. They were holding a phone that glowed faintly in the dark. I stumbled back from the window, locked every door, every window. As I reached for my phone to call the police, it started ringing again. Unknown caller. I declined. It rang again, and again. 5 times in a row, instantly, reconnecting. Finally, I answered on speaker. If you don't stop, I'm calling the police, I snapped. For a moment, only silence. Then, I can see you. My chest tightened. Don't look out the window, the voice added, and the line went dead. I didn't want to, but my eyes moved on their own. Outside, nothing. But in the window's reflection, my face was smiling, and I wasn't. At 12:47 a.m., the power went out. The apartment fell into blackness. I grabbed a flashlight and stood still, listening to the sound of rain and something else, a faint scraping through the walls. My phone buzzed again. One new voicemail. My hands shook as I played it. At first, only the sound of rain. Then a metallic dragging noise, like something being pulled across wet pavement. Finally, a whisper. You answered. Now, let me in. The message ended with 3 distinct knocks. And a second later, from my front door, came the same slow, deliberate knock. 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 I held my breath, frozen in place. Then came a voice, soft, trembling, from the other side. Please, I'm hurt. Let me use your phone. It was a woman. I stepped closer. "Who's there?" I asked. Her voice wavered. "Please, I can't see." I leaned toward the peephole. Nothing. Just the dim, flickering corridor light. Then a whisper pressed directly against the door. "You shouldn't have answered." The peephole went black, as if someone's eye had covered it. From the other side, I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair, just as my phone started to ring again. But this time, it wasn't unknown caller. It was my own number. I stared at the screen, my stomach dropping. I answered without thinking. Static. Then my own voice whispered through the line. "Don't look behind you." For a full 5 seconds, I couldn't breathe. I didn't want to turn, but the silence behind me grew unbearable. I turned, slowly. The reflection on the dark TV screen showed a tall, drenched figure standing directly behind me, its face lost in shadow. I spun around, flashlight trembling. The room was empty. Only the faint smell of rain remained. When the storm ended, I packed everything I could fit into a suitcase and left. I moved 2 towns over, changed my number, told myself I was just overtired, hallucinating, anything to make it make sense. For weeks, nothing happened. No strange calls, no shadows, no whispers. Then one night, while unpacking boxes, my phone buzzed. New voicemail. No missed call, no number, just the message waiting. I pressed play. Rain, footsteps. Then, in my own voice, "You moved, but I still have your number. Now." Sometimes, late at night, my phone rings, just once. Never long enough to answer. No ID, no sound. But every time it happens, if I listen closely, I swear, I can hear faint breathing on the other end. Patient, wet, and waiting for me to pick up again. They say curiosity doesn't kill you. It just waits by your window until you look back. One early spring night, after 3 days of relentless rain, I made the mistake of pulling my apartment curtain aside. And once I saw her, she never stopped watching. The rain blurred the courtyard into shifting shadows. But at around 11 p.m., I noticed a soft tapping against the window. Tick, tick, coming from outside. Impossible, since my apartment was on the 2nd floor with no balcony. Lightning revealed a pale, expressionless woman standing below. Her head tilted up, eyes fixed on my window, long dark hair plastered to her soaked dress. She vanished in a flash, but the memory haunted me. The next night, the storm intensified, and the tapping returned. This time, her face was level with mine, floating impossibly outside the window. Dark, hollow eyes following me perfectly before curling into a small, unnatural smile. Terrified, I set up my phone to record on the 3rd night. At 1:13 a.m., the battery died, and when I checked the footage, A face pressed against the glass, mouth open, as if trying to speak. Then the video cut out. Returning early the next day, I saw small, bare footprints in the basement puddles leading beneath my window. That night, I taped the curtains shut, but around 3 a.m., I woke to condensation forming inside the glass and a handprint pressed flat against it. The following night, unknown texts warned me. You saw me. Now you have to let me in. As frantic tapping echoed. Tick, 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 driving me to flee barefoot into the night. The landlord later mailed my things with a chilling note. My umbrella was left by the window, and water had dripped inside, as though someone had been standing there, watching. Even now, when it rains, I find myself glancing at windows, hearing that same patient, haunting sound. Tick, 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 as if she is still out there, waiting for me to look. You ever hear something in your attic late at night and convince yourself it's just the wind? I told myself that too, until the voices started saying my name. And by then, the footsteps had already reached the stairs. It began the year I moved into my grandmother's old farmhouse, a creaking wooden relic surrounded by rain-soaked fields. Locals called it the Hollow House because every sound echoed like it was alive. I thought it'd be peaceful, cheap rent, quiet surroundings, but quiet has a way of letting you hear what shouldn't exist. The first night, while rain drummed against the roof, I heard a faint creak above me. It grew sharper, heavier, like footsteps pacing back and forth in the attic. I told myself it was just the old house settling, but as I blew out the candle, I swore I heard a whisper between the creaks, a breath that wasn't mine. By the second night, the storm had deepened. While unpacking, I noticed an attic door hidden in the hallway ceiling. A pull cord dangled from it. When I tugged it, the trap door cracked open and released a draft that smelled like rot. My flashlight revealed nothing but cobwebs until it caught faint fingernail scratches on the inside of the wood. I slammed it shut. That night, I woke at 2 a.m. to whispering. 2 voices, low and murmuring, just above my ceiling. Then, silence, and finally, one of them whispered, "He's awake." The next evening, the storm worsened. I tried to ignore it, sipping coffee, as thunder shook the walls. Then something clattered in the hall. The attic cord was swaying. I stood beneath it, frozen. When I pulled the ladder down, the air that rushed out was wet and metallic. I climbed a few steps and shone my flashlight up, catching the outline of a crouched shape in the corner. I stumbled back, light jerking, and it vanished. The attic was empty when I looked again. But later, I found a single small footprint pressed into the dust. That night, I left my phone recording in the kitchen. Around midnight, I woke to slow footsteps in the hall. and a whisper right outside my door. You shouldn't have opened it. The next morning, I checked the recording. At first, just rain. Then creaks, footsteps, and finally a whisper beside the microphone. He's not alone anymore. The fifth night, I came home to find the attic door wide open, ladder hanging low, air thick with damp decay. As I called my friend Daniel, the line went to static. I looked up and saw fingers, thin, grayish, curling over the trapdoor edge. I bolted into the rain, barefoot, never looking back. A month later, Daniel went to collect my things. When he called, his voice trembled. The attic floor, he said, was covered in carvings, hundreds of words scratched into the wood. Most were nonsense, looping symbols, but at the center, 3 words were etched deep. We never left. He sent a photo, but I deleted it instantly. Now, wherever I live, when it rains, I still hear that faint creak above the ceiling. And if I hold my breath long enough, I can almost hear them whisper again. Soft, patient, familiar. They say every house has one room that never feels right. The one where the air is too cold, the walls seem to close in, and the door sticks no matter how many times you fix it. In my grandmother's old home, that room was upstairs, the locked one at the end of the hall. We never opened it. Not until the night the rain wouldn't stop, and something inside began to knock back. When I was a kid, that house was my whole world. An old, creaking structure in the middle of the Oregon woods, surrounded by pines that dripped even after the rain stopped. The air always smelled like damp earth, rust, and the faint sweetness of decaying leaves. My grandmother, Ruth, used to say the rain belonged to the house, that it fed it. I thought she was being poetic, until the night I learned what she meant. That locked room had always been there, the last door at the end of the hall. The wood around it was darker than the rest, soft and cold to the touch, as if it soaked in every drop of rain that ever fell. Sometimes, when I walked by, I'd hear faint noises behind it. A drip, a sigh, or what sounded like a slow shuffle. Once, when I was 10, I asked Grandma why it was locked. She smiled the way people do when they're trying not to look afraid. Some rooms aren't meant for living, she said softly. We keep that one closed. Years later, when she passed, the house sat empty. When the estate lawyer called to say it was mine, I didn't want it, but I drove up anyway, just to see what needed fixing. The moment I stepped inside, that smell hit me again. Rain-soaked wood, mold, and something metallic underneath. Most rooms were just dusty echoes of the past. The teapot still on the stove, the clock still ticking. But upstairs, that same gray door waited. Still damp, still locked, and the key sat on the hallway table, as if expecting me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain fell hard, steady, endless. Around midnight, I heard it, a soft dripping sound, rhythmic and hollow. Drip, pause, drip. I followed it into the hallway, bare feet pressing against the cold wood, and realized it was coming from behind the locked door. I pressed my ear to it. At first, nothing but the faint echo of an empty room. Then, a shuffle, a sound too intentional to be the rain. The metal knob was ice cold beneath my palm, and I felt something pulsing faintly through it, like a heartbeat. I stepped back, whispering to myself, "It's just the rain." But later that night, half asleep, I heard it again, 3 slow knocks from upstairs. By the next day, the storm hadn't stopped. The rain came down in sheets, the gutters overflowing, the roof groaning. I was restless, tired, and when I walked through the hall again, the key was on the floor, halfway between my room and that door, as if someone had dropped it there on purpose. I should have ignored it, but curiosity outweighs fear more often than it should. I picked it up, slid it into the lock, and turned. The wood resisted at first, then gave way with a slow groan. The smell hit me instantly, wet and sour, like standing water in a cellar. The air was heavy. Inside, the room was small and dark. The window in the far wall was cracked open, just enough to let rain in, forming puddles on the warped floorboards. In the center stood a rusted iron bed frame with a single rotted mattress, empty except for a leather-bound notebook lying on the pillow. The writing inside was my grandmother's, faded, water-stained, but legible enough. "He won't stop knocking. I told him the rain can't let him in, but he's patient. He always was." There were entries from decades before I was born, ending with one circled line: "Don't open the door during the rain." A drop landed on the page. I looked up. The ceiling was dry. Another hit my wrist. Only it wasn't water. It was dark red. And then came the knock. 3 slow, heavy thuds from somewhere deeper inside the room. I slammed the door, locked it, and backed away, shaking. A voice whispered from behind the wood, low, hoarse, and close. "She promised you'd open it." The lights flickered. The air went cold enough to see my breath. The door rattled, soft at first, then harder. "She promised," it said again, louder. I ran, tearing down the stairs, throwing the front door open into the storm. Rain lashed my face, thunder cracked above, and when I looked back, the house went dark, completely black. Then, faintly, beneath the thunder, came 3 slow knocks from inside the walls. I left that night, never went back, A month later, the real estate agent called. The new owners wanted to ask me something. During a storm, the ceiling in the upstairs hallway had collapsed, revealing a hidden crawl space between the floors. Inside, they found an iron bed frame wedged between the beams and a set of human bones lying on top of it. The skull was turned upward, facing a hole in the roof, as if watching the rain. That night, as I read the email, it began to pour outside my apartment, hard, relentless, and beneath the hiss of rain, I heard it again. 3 slow, patient knocks from somewhere behind the wall. Then, a whisper, soft and wet with tears. You kept your promise. You opened it. Then, silence. Only the steady rhythm of rain. And under it, faint, pulsing, almost human, the sound of a heartbeat, waiting for me to come home.